Welcome to From Stardust to Us, in-depth conversations with thought leaders, artists, and spiritual activists, navigating the challenges of our times with integrity, joy, and purpose. I'm Bernice Marie Daly.
And I'm Linnell Hayden. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate our listeners. You can find us on YouTube, Buzzsprout, or any place where podcasts are found. If you enjoy our conversation, please help us reach more people by subscribing, liking, and commenting. So let's get into this week's conversation. We are delighted to have John Deuel with us today. John can be found living out his vocation as a spiritual director and supervisor, retreat facilitator, and mystic pilgrim. An experienced leader of small groups, he is a member of Spiritual Directors International, serves on the board of the Guild for Spiritual Guidance, and helps out in a variety of other organizations. 2 years ago, John closed out a 36-year-long career in high tech, which allows him to bring a comfort with technology to even more spiritual spaces and a welcoming mystic spirituality into tech spaces. He enjoys practicing piano, writing, being on retreat, chatting with friends, and spending time with his husband, Bill. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
So, John, we generally like to start with a person's sort of origin story. And you did mention in a prior email correspondence that we had that you grew up in Texas. So we're wondering if you maybe can share something about your early life that might have influenced you into the direction that you are now as a spiritual director and supervisor.
So that's an interesting one. Thinking about formative childhood experiences and what comes to mind. I was raised Roman Catholic, and my family went to church every Sunday, and we, for some reason, sat in the front pew. There were 4 kids, and we were not particularly well. We were well trained, I'll say that. We were kids, so we were squirming, but we were taught to not. But the thing that came to mind as I thought about formative experiences was something that I saw my father do. When it came time to sing a hymn, we stood up and he opened the songbook and sang this thing like he was having the best time in his life. I have no idea if he was any good at singing. I don't remember. I was probably 10 or 11. But I looked up at him and I thought, there's no fear there. That's just going for it. And this image comes back to me a lot. I have a very complicated set of relationships with the memory of my father, but this image comes back to me a lot when I think about trying new things or doing something that might be embarrassing and realizing that, you know what, it's not going to kill me, and it might even be fun. And so I admire that. I'm not sure he was trying to teach a lesson, but that's a scene that's kind of stuck in my memory that reminds me to when that fear rises up, when it's like, well, I'm going to look like an idiot if I even try this because I will fall on my face or sound like yeah. Then I just, I try to lean into it and try it. And I'm here now, having tried lots of things.
There you go.
So that's been your path then, to even when your voice shakes, to speak your truth, so to speak, as the saying goes.
That is a path I've tried to live. I don't know that I've always done a fantastic job at it. Sometimes I do cave to the fear, but I think more and more as I age, that's the intention, and that's the place I try to live. Yeah.
It's interesting, too, that this early memory takes place in a church in light of the fact that your life work is in spirituality or, as a spiritual director or supervisor. So You also refer to yourself as a mystic pilgrim. I have to say, it's an interesting combo of words, a mystic pilgrim. So, what is that? And how does that impact your life? What does that mean for you on a, everyday basis?
I'm tempted to ask you what you think it means. I wrote it for y'all. Um, but I was thinking about how to describe my life, and a mystic pilgrim is what came to mind. So the mystic part says to me it's someone who sees deeply and who attends to that depth. Um, and and so the surface is where all the interaction that we see kind of happens. Um, but but like with the tides and the moon doesn't pull just on the surface of the ocean. The moon pulls on the whole ocean, and so it's that sense of depth, that awareness of depth, and attending to that, um, being present to that, I think is what feels mystic to me. So the pilgrim is for me someone who's journeying through their life and their world with an intention to find meaning, to make meaning, and to experience their journey through the world every day as one of transformation. And so the encounters with the world and with other people and with the environment are transformative to the pilgrim, because the pilgrim's thinking about that transformation. That's part of the intent. So that's what it describes to me in terms of how I live my life, with an attention to what's below the surface, with an attention to that depth of the experience of now. And with that, a sense of making meaning from that and being transformed and transforming in that space.
Hmm. Hmm. I wonder if there's uh, an experience you could share that has impacted you that you would demonstrate that.
An experience of being a mystic pilgrim in the world. Hmm. There was a time, it was in 2005. I was working at a company way out on Long Island, hours away from where I live. And so I lived out on Long Island during the week, and I'd come back home on the weekends. Thursday afternoons, I'd get in my car, I'd sit in the Long Island Expressway traffic until I managed to get back home. And then on Friday, I'd work from home, and Sunday night, I would go back out to Long Island every week. And one Thursday afternoon, sitting in traffic on the LIE, like usual, I I lost all of the things I was seeing. I wasn't seeing the cars. I wasn't seeing the road. I wasn't seeing anything. It was gone. And what had replaced it, what I was aware of, what I was seeing, were all the people around me, all the other cars that were on the expressway. But I wasn't seeing them as bodies, as people like that. I was seeing them as these sort of shining orbs of light. Um, and they were all so beautiful. This light was so incredibly beautiful that it almost compelled love. I was also a shining orb of light, and there was a connection between me and each one of these other shining orbs of light all around me. And it was that connection that words don't get at it, right? Words are inadequate um, to that experience, but the word that the only word that I've been able to attach to that connection is love. And it was entirely involuntary. It just was present because of who and what I think we are. And that's what I saw. I saw that vividly. And it went on for some amount of time. I don't know how long, not long enough to crash the car, obviously. Um, but it's the traffic on the LIE, so it's not like we were moving. Um, and then the vision was gone. And and that was in 2005. And it took me a long time before I processed what that meant and the way it transformed my life.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
that's a moment of being a mystic pilgrim in the world. That one came for me.
Mhm.
I didn't come for it. Um, uh, so now I kind of soak them up when I can find them.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
sounds almost like this glimpse into a non-duality sort of mystic, the divine love that many people have, but they really don't know what it is. They don't know what to do with it. Then there's that struggle to embody that that takes time. It's so easy to get wrapped up back into the ego and culture and biases and whatnot. So there's a time period of processing what that
Yeah.
experience was. So that I assume you were in the tech world at that time, right? Am I assuming correctly,
Yeah.
back in 2005? And
Yep.
then you retired, and you could have done anything after retirement. You could have been a consultant for corporations or whatever, but you went into the spiritual space. So is that when, first I'd like to ask, when you had that experience, were you a spiritual seeker? Did it happen? Because these experiences do just happen. It's not something that you can actually force, from my understanding and my own experience. So were you a spiritual seeker? So has spirituality always been sort of part of who you are? Or I'm intrigued by this drastic transition from being a high-tech, brainiac to a spiritual director and supervisor.
I don't know if I will I didn't put Brainiac in the bio, but you know what?
Take it.
I'll take it. It wasn't an abrupt transition. But to go to your question, I've never not been in the church.
Okay.
So even when wrestling with coming out as a gay Roman Catholic kid, um, there was a I never felt alienated from the church. I did have to have an epiphany of understanding that God loves me the way I am, and that the church's issues with that belong to the human institution and not the love of God. So um, so I have always been connected to faith communities. It's always been a huge part of my life, regular part of my life.
Mhm.
I don't know that I really felt like I was hunting for anything at that at that moment. I don't know that I was waiting to find something. I was just working and trying to get home because choir practice is Thursday nights and I got to get home for choir. There's a thread there, isn't there? I will, in terms of the transition, I'll say that, so yeah, so I took that, I didn't do much with that experience. And I think a lot of people have mystical or numinous experiences. And then even as they recognize how powerful they might have been for themselves or how impossible it is to describe them, they are even more afraid to talk about them with people
Yeah,
because of the sense that it will be seen as some sort of, crazy delusion or something.
strange
Um,
things, strange things happening. Yeah,
yes, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But I entered formation to become a spiritual director in 2014, and I didn't retire from my tech gig until 2023. So I was a spiritual director for good 7 or 8 years before leaving the tech industry, and it changed how I was in the workplace. Um, I thought it changed how I was in the workplace a lot, but I think it just made me more aware of how I was shifting my focus in in the places that I worked.
I don't know that our listeners know what a spiritual director is or what a supervisor is. So could you say something about what that actually is and what that actually like looks like? You know, if you were my spiritual director, what would happen or what would that be like? And then what is a supervisor? So if just to sort of stick on that topic for a moment before we jump into the high tech stuff, can you say something about that?
Sure. So spiritual direction is um, best described, I think, generally as a ministry of sacred listening and presence. So there are several names that people will use for it: spiritual direction, spiritual companioning, spiritual guidance. Um, all of these names describe the general practice of spiritual director being with someone as a companion on their spiritual journey. And so spiritual directors typically meet with directees about once a month, and they discuss whatever the directee is going through or wants to bring to the conversation, to a spiritual conversation. The job of the spiritual director really is to notice what what's going on in that, in whatever that sharing is, and to reflect that, to uh, to sense that energy, if you will. And I hesitate to use the word help, but it's easiest one to use. Um, Help someone see what they're actually saying, what they're seeing, what they're experiencing. So I say that because I believe that we are each created in the image and likeness of the divine source, and we move with that source, that as a spiritual director, I join you for a time as a partner in that dance. And when we're together, we'll talk about spiritual goings on in your life, or what you notice or feel as a spiritual person in the world. The interesting. You mentioned in the bio that I'm a part of Spiritual Directors International, which is a large organization association for professional spiritual directors and spiritual guides and companions. And one of the things that they don't do is define it.
Interesting.
And 35 years ago, when the organization was forming, they worked really hard at building a definition of spiritual direction and failed. What they created instead was a set of ethical conduct guidelines, which they did all agree um, described practicing this ministry well.
Mhm.
And at the time, one of the founders said, she was relating this story recently, and she said at the time she felt like that was a failure, that they had failed to define spiritual
Oh,
direction.
mhm.
And she said she realizes now that was a great gift of the Spirit, was to leave it open. So each spiritual
Right.
director, each spiritual companion may
Uh-huh.
practice that in a particularly unique way. Do you want
Uh,
me to talk about supervision?
Yes, please.
before that,
Yes.
um, so does that mean I have to like belong to a church or belong to a synagogue or belong to a something, or maybe I have to talk about God the whole time I'm with you? I mean, I'm just thinking of everyday folks and how they kind of can feel into this kind of space. Does that make any sense? Am I?
And it makes 100% sense. And no, you don't have to belong to any church. And no, you don't have to talk about God or use that name. Um, there's the sense of the depth that I was talking about earlier when we were talking about mystic pilgrim. I think we all have a sense of what that depth is for us as individuals. And part of the spiritual direction or spiritual companioning relationship is really just attending to that depth. And so everybody, or just church people and non-church people and anti-church people all have a sense of somewhere of where what's deep in them. And that's all that it is. It's about caring for that depth.
Hmm.
There's such a hunger for that type of conversation as well, and many people don't really know who they can talk to about their feelings with regards to spirituality or God or the earth, or what's happening and how that all ties together, what they're going through inside themselves emotionally. So I think this is a great gift to offer this to your community. Now, yeah, let's get to supervision. How does that differ?
So all sort of helping professions, all helping professionals uh, have a responsibility to do that ethically and to do that from as healthy a place as possible. And part of that responsibility involves being in supervision. So a supervisor is somebody who sits with the practitioner. So a spiritual direction supervisor would sit with a spiritual director and help them process what they're going through at being a spiritual director and how to become the best spiritual director they can be, the one that's inside of them. So as a spiritual director, I meet with my own supervision group. I describe what issues concern me or what I'm wrestling with a particular spiritual direction task or relationship or something. And they help me. They give me recommendations and challenges and affirmations and stuff. And as a supervisor, I will sit with another spiritual director who we need to have a place where we can bring these things that are part of our continued professional development as spiritual directors. So the supervision piece of it is specifically aimed at people who are spiritual companions, and helping them be better spiritual companions, spiritual directors, whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for explaining that. Mentioned that you do it in a group, so I gather you can do it one-on-one, or you can do it with a group of people that you work with who
Yes.
are all sort of in that whole field, I'll call it.
Correct. Yes, there's one of the most common ways for spiritual directors to receive supervision is in a group of peers,
Uh-huh.
specifically organized to provide that supervision. So each time that group meets, one person takes a turn at being the supervised person, and the rest of the group functions as the supervisor. And then you rotate that around. That works fine for fairly small spiritual direction practices. If I'm not doing it a lot, my turn only comes up in my group every, 4 to 6 months, that's fine. If I'm doing a lot of spiritual direction, I might need a one-on-one session with a supervisor on a more regular basis.
Right, right. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, yeah.
I liked how you described spiritual direction as um, presence and listening and reflection. And people forget these, it's easy to forget that these helping professionals do carry the burdens of the world in many ways when you open yourself to be that compassionate and open, to listening and reflecting, and they need that supervision themselves in order to process what they're feeling, what they've heard, and just witnessing, is, yeah.
Absolutely. Right.
So, I wanted to move into, I just had a statement about that. No question. I wanted to move back into your brainiac. I just assume anybody that has anything to do with technology is super smart. So,
Mm.
Bernice, did you have a follow-up on that? I wanted to move into the ask him about.
Oh, I know you're anxious to get into the
Yeah.
high-techy stuff. Go for
I
it.
do, because there's a lot of angst right now with AI. It's going to take over the world. It's going to put everybody out of work. It's going to exterminate the human species, all this fear mongering. I'm wondering, from your perspective, having been in that world and now with your spiritual insights, what do you say about that?
Hmm. We're in a we're in a part of the process. There's a hype curve for new things, and we are definitely in the sort of the hype section of this curve with respect to what everybody talks about as AI. And when we talk about AI and when everybody stuffs AI into their software like Zoom, what we're really getting is something called a large language model, which is a bit of technology that is specifically designed to be able to sound like a person. And so it's trained with a huge amount of input data, and it does nowadays a very good job at sounding like a person. Doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean uh, yeah, I'm just going to say it doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean you should believe it. It doesn't mean it's not helpful or can't be helpful. So it is a tricky thing. And as I said, we're in this hype section where everybody's got to have it. Before I left my job, the management of my company, the senior leadership of my company, and this is before everybody had AI in every single thing. They were shoving it down my throat. I was building, perfectly lovely products, and they wanted some piece of it to be, machine learning and AI. And they're like, but we have to have that. I'm like, but why? It's not helpful and it doesn't aid our customers in anything, but it has to be there for the marketing impact of it all. So you asked what I think about the future of AI and the anxiety around AI. We're spending way too much money and time and energy shoving it into every little corner of every damn thing there is. And okay, I'll give you an example. Microwave ovens.
Mhm.
If you remember when microwave ovens came out,
Oh, yes, I do actually.
right, right, the cookbooks were like, you will now make everything in your microwave oven, your stovetop, and your oven, your conventional oven are now obsolete.
Right, right.
And we were supposed to cook everything for dinner for the whole family in the microwave oven and scramble our eggs in the morning in the microwave oven and all of that
Mhm.
stuff. And we bought special things for it. And you know what? It's great at making popcorn. It's amazing at heating water, and defrosting a frozen burrito. I mean, every kitchen has a microwave now. And we all use the microwave almost every day, but we don't use it for every single thing. This
Right,
is what I'm hoping happens to the LLMs and AI.
right.
It's what I expect will happen.
Mhm.
Um, there are some bigger dangers, perhaps, or different dangers than there were with microwave ovens. With microwave ovens, we had crappy seals and with the radiation, but with AI, we have these large language models giving us answers that are wrong. I asked Google's AI once, who said I'll have what she's having in the Harry Met Sally movie,
Mm.
and it said that who's having I'll have what she's having was a line spoken by Meg Ryan in when Harry Met Sally. It's like, no, wrong.
Right.
It was like Carl Reiner's mother or
That's
something.
right. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So there's a different danger there, but I do expect that where we'll be is this technology that we call AI will do a great job at transcribing our meeting minutes,
Mhm.
which it already really does, and we'll do other things that we find really helpful. And
Mhm.
then there's a whole bunch of stuff it's not going to do, and we're going to figure that out.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about with the false memories. I ran across an article about that. I think they call them false artifacts or something.
Mm.
And I ran into that doing some research and I thought, oh, I'm going to use AI. So I used Chat GPT to try to
Mhm.
research something. And it came up with this, amazing thing that supposedly happened, but I couldn't find it. I double checked. I went to Google, I went to other search engines, try to find this thing that happened, and I couldn't find it anywhere. The only other place I found it was somebody had written an article on Medium, which is like Substack, that basically transcribed what ChatGPT said. So that was only that. So obviously they got it from ChatGPT too and just posted it. And I thought, well, this is terrible. I mean, it's coming up with history that never happened.
People will point out that, and
Yeah.
as I mentioned, that these models and these systems are built to sound like humans. They're not built to be right. They're
Yeah.
not built with a priority on never saying something that's not true. They're built 100% with a priority on sounding believable. So they will completely make up studies that never happened and cite sources that don't exist and create people out of thin air because it sounds really good.
Yeah.
Doesn't
So
matter to these systems if it's right.
I always double check when it gives me supposed facts, but to your point of we will figure out what it's good for, as we did with the microwave oven. I have to agree with that because we're not going to allow it to strip our agency and our creativity and our contribution to our own lives and communities. Which is there's an analogy I read about. Pretty interesting. This is short. I'll just mention this real quick. But when back in I guess it was the 50s when powdered cake mix first came out. And all you had to do was add water and they thought it was going to be a big hit. Well, the women didn't like that. They didn't like it at all because all they had to do was add water and put it in the oven. So the companies made a change and they took out the powdered egg so that now you had to add the egg. So then it was a big hit because now all of a sudden they felt like they were actually doing something in the kitchen to create this cake. So it's kind of maybe the same thing. We use microwave ovens to reheat our food and to make popcorn, but it ain't going to cook our Thanksgiving dinners,
Yep.
Do you see any connection between is there any place in the spiritual world for this high tech? It doesn't necessarily have to be the AI as we know it now, but this sort of, there's this whole transhumanism movement as well, where we're going to all put chips in our brains. Or does this separate us further from the divine? Or have you thought about this at all on this level? Or is this a way to enhance perhaps our evolution?
I think if we were going to enhance our evolution, I don't think it's going to be, I was going to say, I don't think it's going to be by having a wet connection with some sort of gigantic Google-sized database in our brains. I don't know that wouldn't necessarily help because I can imagine that having access to a better understanding of the consequences of my actions might make me a better actor. But what I think that when I think of evolution, when I think of the challenges that we are currently faced with and what I would think is a next step in human evolution, I think that the sense of separateness that somehow the best thing for me to do is to preserve and better my life, as opposed to the best thing for me to do is to figure out how to preserve and better our lives together. I think that feels to me to be what makes a difference. And when I think of it from an evolutionary perspective, in the instinctual drives that we have for survival, and when we feel like there's a scarcity, then we're fighting for resources, and we're going to fight and kill because if it's our survival to have, the food and the water that we need. And I think that that's largely a lie, that there is enough. The truth is there is enough if we actually shifted our perspective from telling ourselves there's not enough to realizing that there is enough, and how do we get it to everybody who needs it? Like, not how do I build a pile so high that no amount of disaster could ever leave me hungry. Take that mindset and end it, evolve away from it, and evolve towards a mindset of how do I take all of this lettuce that's growing in the garden in my backyard and get it to people who need it? And how do we do that at scale? And how do we do that as communities? And how do we stop living for myself, my nation, my state, my household, and start living for us? So I don't know if technology, if brain implants could fix that, but if brain implants could fix that, it might be something to think about. I don't know. Because I would like to get away from the world of thinking and theologies of scarcity that we live in that drive so much suffering in the world.
Yeah, the technology has certainly allowed us to connect in ways we haven't before. Right now, three of us, you're in New Jersey, I'm in Connecticut, Linnell is in California. Just obviously a very simple little example, but we could not have done this before this technology was available. So then we just, exponentially so much more. And then I have, as I suspect you all both do, any number of emails in my inbox about spiritual opportunities, retreats, programs, dealing with resilience, dealing with fear, opening your heart, all and then of course within religious traditions themselves. Um, and then there seems to be this other side, which we can hear every day if we want to listen to it all day long, about people kind of crashing into each other around points of view. And then the obvious literal battles, wars going on with a great deal of suffering all over the place. So it seems to me that the question, the underlying question I'm asking is how do we interface the spiritual, what you want to call them, values, if you want, this thing we can't define or describe too well, uh, in this other larger space when we can meet each other, in a matter of a second from being around the world and connect in ways that are amazing. And does all the emails in my inbox, are they moving toward that? Or, what is the capacity? What is the requirements that we humans need to develop? What are the skills we need to develop to be able to inculcate these spiritual values into this very different medium of our way of being connected? You mentioned early on that you've always been involved in some religious institution, a church of some sort or whatever. I don't know, but I'm assuming that you may have, moved from one religious church to a different religious church or whatever in the course of your own process. But so we could talk about incorporating spirituality from a religious point of view, but we could also talk about it for the more open-ended, not necessarily dogma or any of that. But at the moment, um, the techie stuff doesn't appear to be holding anything near ethics that I could kind of resonate with. And yeah, that's a big problem. And in addition to, there is this threat that these machines can, obviously going to be smarter even than our brainiacs and faster. So, they don't really need us for a whole lot of time. So I'm not sure how to address this as a specific question, but I do remember the first time I used the chat box or whatever it's called, ChatGPT, and I asked it a question that I knew the answer to, because I figured when I hear what it has to say, at least I'll know if that's true or not. And it gave me the answer in like 2 seconds, 4 paragraphs, boom. But my immediate gut reaction was, I no longer need to think because these machines are going to be doing it for me. And that scared the bejeebers out of me. And so, anyway, somewhere in all that is the question or reflection, John. How to bring in interface spirituality into this high tech world that you're so familiar with.
So I'm at an age where calculators showed up as my math education got
Mm-hmm.
intense. And there was a big struggle, right? You couldn't have a calculator in class, you couldn't use a calculator to do your homework, stuff like that, because calculators were going to be doing all of the thinking for us when it came
Right.
to math. Now we don't think twice about using a calculator to do a math problem. And I don't think that we've suddenly become incapable humans as a result. I'll say it's handy to be able to do some
Sure.
basic mathematical reasoning without dealing with a machine. And
Mhm.
I learned some great stuff as a kid. But so there's always a point in the advent of a new technology where there's a lot of fear about how it's going to change us as
Mhm.
humans. And we're certainly there with this stuff.
Right.
How do we bring or what do we do with spirituality in this space, or how do we keep from losing ourselves here and losing
Right.
our
Right.
society and everything? And I tend to think of it less from the perspective of how do we bring spirituality per se into the space, but how do we keep humanity in this space?
Mhm.
One of the first things that jumps to mind for me in the struggles, and I've been online as long as there's been a line. At the very beginning of my career, that's what we did. We built the backbone of the internet, and
Mhm.
this was what we did. So I've done this for my whole career. The first thing that jumps to mind in this struggle is how uh, how anonymity works and how many people fall into a space of I can I can be completely horrid online
Mhm.
to other people because nobody knows it's me, and there are no consequences for me
Mhm.
being completely horrible online. When you're standing in a room at a party and you're talking to somebody that you just met, you may not know them any better than I know some random person online. But I'm not going to be completely horrible. I'm not going to feel as free to let all of my bile out on this other human because I can't do it anonymously. There will be consequences. If I think about that, I think about how not that I want to eliminate anonymity online. There's a lot of reasons why it's good to be able to go to online spaces and be anonymous. Right now, trans people are being, chased all over the country by violent folks, and you want to find community, and you don't want to risk your own personal safety to do that. But at the same time, we have people who are, out there using that anonymity to just I don't know, take all the humanity out of these places, right? So you end up with places like what Twitter has become, and what 4chan used to be, and other. Anyway, sorry. So that's what I think about. I think about so I've never tried to be particularly anonymous online. I've always been me in spaces where I socialize online, and I think that that's being honest and being open, being vulnerable and being kind, um, are really what it's about in terms of keeping technology or using technology, letting technology be used in ways that are healthy and
Mhm.
life-giving and not destructive. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but those are kind of the things. So it's not, I don't think so much about bringing spirituality into online spaces, although for groups that want to meet around a spiritual center, then certainly
Mhm.
I understand and practice bringing spiritual practices into online spaces. But
Mhm.
in the general world, it's I don't think I institutional religion is responsible for at least as much bad as good right now. So
Mhm.
I don't think that it's wonderful to inject institutional religion into places where it's not needed or isn't helpful. But I do think maintaining our humanity
Mhm.
is super
Mhm.
important.
Yeah, that's a good way of stating it.
Thanks.
How do we to keep our humanity during all these changes with technology and whatnot? And that goes back to your earlier comment about thinking of community and not just yourself. I think, that connection. If we can keep connected with the divinity that is in everyone and see that the divinity that's within us is also within our neighbor. So how can you not be human and kind and compassionate with them?
So it seems that we still have to be responsible, huh? I can't blame these machines, eh? I can't blame the microwave because it's not making my dinner, and I can't blame I can't do that. Well, I can try, and we live in a in a world, I would say, at least in the sort of media conversation. Certainly in this country, we could even just stick to this country with um, so many, I'll say, mixed messages or misleading messages that many people are appear to be susceptible to not critiquing
Hmm.
or wondering or reflecting on. And I do think I have to say this, that uh, and not only because of the technology, but of the whole environmental crisis, climate change, which is, going to disregard no matter who you are, where you are. It makes absolutely no difference. It'll be a level playing field, as they say, although the current situation is really impacting people who have less advantage, by significantly less advantage at the moment. But I don't think climate change is anywhere near half over
Yeah.
by any means. So that's a whole other um, uh, piece of how humans uh, might might want to think about coming together to deal with something that's really a global situation that's not going to be resolved, even just one country, or even just one region, or just one anything. So this movement uh, toward the collective, if you will, to this notion of um, uh, I really don't exist separate from anything, really, but I certainly don't exist separate from you. Yeah. Uh, I have another question, but I want to give Linnell a chance to jump in if you have another thought in mind.
No, go
No?
ahead.
All right. Well, uh, you made a big change, what you said, 36 years
Hmm.
in this profession. And I think I could guess what you might say to this, but I'll ask to hear your words around this. Wow, you could have made a lot of bucks just staying right where you are. I mean, this is an industry that's not going away, and you decided to leave. It's like, what's the matter with this guy? Why did you leave? One of the areas of the perspective of the future that's going to be around and growing. Um, why, why did you leave?
So I mentioned that I started my formation to become a spiritual director before I conceived of leaving the tech industry full time, and that gave me I don't know, more conscious awareness of how I saw the world, or that experience from 2005, what it meant to me.
Mm,
And I had been in the tech industry since since my beginnings, and had a great had a great time creating things, and I loved analyzing complicated systems, and I loved producing stuff with fun and cool and interesting people. And I enjoyed the challenge of working with the technology. And then I realized that the challenge that I really enjoyed was working with the people. The technology got kind of boring, honestly. The people were way more interesting. And I managed people in technology organizations for years and years and years. And as part of that training, and as part of my realization of who I was and who we are as people, I realized that my priority that I was practicing as a professional in the technology industry was about the people who worked in my team,
mm,
and about providing an experience for them where they felt fulfilled doing their jobs. They didn't hate coming to work. They enjoyed coming to work. They enjoyed what they did. They
mhm,
felt like they were making a difference and were cared about. And I did. I cared about them. I cared about those things. The other
mhm,
things that the business told me to care about, profit and happy customers and stuff,
mhm.
those were important to me as means to an end.
We usually, first of all, if there's any information you would like to share that about how someone could reach you, one of our listeners is, you can say whatever it is that you want for your contact information. You can share that right now.
Okay. So I
Mhm.
do have a website, and the website is, uh, hmm. So I'm going to say the characters and then I'll tell you what it means.
Okay.
lvxfrms.org. It stands for Love Transforms. lvxfrms.org. And you can find out how to contact me. You can read about spiritual direction or supervision on there, or find my social media handles, whatever.
And if I just Google you, will it show up
If
LVX
you
blah blah
Google me, you'll find somehow you'll find me, yes.
blah somewhere? Okay, because I might not remember all those letters.
Spell your
Um,
last name for our
Yeah,
listen.
that's another thing.
Yes.
Mhm.
yes, it is Deuel.
Okay.
D
And
as in
John with
David,
an H.
Euel, and John, yes.
Okay.
Excellent, excellent. And then the last thing we would ask before we leave is if you would like to share with us a favorite quote. We usually ask our guests to choose a poem or a quote or something that is meaningful to them that we could share as our kind of closing comment.
So, yes, thank you, Bernice, and thank you, Bernice and Linnell, for inviting me to do this.
Our pleasure.
This is um, two little pieces from Thomas Merton's Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander. I did not know who Thomas Merton was in 2005.
Mm,
Thomas Merton writes, in Louisville at the corner of 4th and Walnut,
mhm,
in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all those people, that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another even though we were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream of separateness, of spurious self-isolation in a special world, the world of renunciation and supposed holiness. He reflects a little on his life as a monk. And then he continues, he goes back to the experience and he says, then it was as if I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts. The depths of their hearts where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge can reach. The core of their reality, the person that each one is in God's eyes. If only they could all see themselves as they really are. If only we could see each other that way all the time. There would be no more war, no more hatred, no more cruelty, no more greed. I suppose the big problem would be that we would fall down and worship each other.
Yeah.
Wow, I love that. Wow.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
John. Thank you, John.
Thank you so
Wonderful.
much, John.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you.